Welcome everybody. As you can see, I am not Dennis, I am not Anton, and I am not Toon. I am SJ. But I am so excited that those awesome folks behind the Developer Hug have handed over the mic to me and this great crew of women to honor Women's History Month. That's right, folks. We get 1 month to acknowledge our amazingness to the world. I kid. We are constantly uplifted and supported by the wonderful people on our teams and in the HubSpot community. And I'm just so happy to be here connecting with all of you, sharing insights on experiences in building our careers, whether that be in HubSpot and development in general, of course, talking a little bit about community building and all that good stuff. So I'm going to quickly introduce myself, and then I'll let everyone else get a chance to introduce themselves. I'm SJ Morris, and my pronouns are she, her, and I run dev community here on the amazing DevRel team at HubSpot. I am responsible for such hits as the HubSpot Ecosystem Mentorship Program. Sometimes for those of you who have been, the dev parties that we have at Inbound, the welcome messages that you receive in your dev Slack, and all kinds of other fun stuff. So I'm always super excited when I get the chance to connect with all of you in this awesome community. I have been working in community for over 20 years, yikes, and in DevRel for over 14. And so much has changed in my career as it's evolved. And I'm really passionate about setting the stage to help others build their careers. So I'm so happy to have this awesome group of folks here to talk about their experiences in doing just that. So I am so lucky to be supported by my awesome panel, Hannah Seligson, Bree Hall, Brooke Bond, and Jennifer Nixon, and I will let them introduce themselves in just a moment. But first, I just want to do some quick housekeeping to let you know how today is going to go. As you may all know, if you signed up, we are talking about bridging the gap and building careers in HubSpot development, I'd say in development in general. We're going to be talking about our specific lived experiences as women getting up and running in these careers. But let me hand it over to the awesome Brooke Bond after we go through our intros, who will go through the developer changelog. I will keep you up to date on everything you need to know about building on HubSpot successfully. And then we'll jump into our panel questions that may or may not include a couple of demos that you won't want to miss. And then we will open it up to your questions. So if you have any for us, don't hesitate to drop them in the chat. Our wonderful chat moderator, Dennis Edson, will make sure that we see them. And once we've gone through all the panel questions, we'll jump right into those audience questions. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to our incredible panelists to introduce themselves. We'll go Hannah, Bree, Brooke, and Jennifer. So let's start with Hannah.
All right. Hi, everyone. So I'm Hannah Seligson, and I am on the developer advocate team here at HubSpot. I focus mostly on our CRM and our APIs. And prior to this, I was an advocate within the cloud native community. And before that, I was a backend engineer building APIs. So that's me. I'll hand it off to Bree. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Hannah. I'm Bree Hall, and I'm a developer advocate also on our DevRel team. I focus mostly with UI extensions. I've been on the team for, crazy to think now, almost a year and a couple of months. And before that, I worked on a different team within HubSpot as a front-end engineer. I got to work on some of the fun CRM data components that are being used within the CRM. So that was a really fun transition to go from building the components to showing people how to use them. Before that, I have had a couple of different front-end roles where I've worked on telecommunications applications and open source design systems as well. So that's me.
Cool. Let's hand it over to Brooke.
Hi, everybody. My name is Brooke. My pronouns are she, her, and I am also a developer advocate here with HubSpot, focusing on our education and communication. So currently you'll see me all over the HubSpot developers YouTube channel. I have lots of great tutorial videos there. So if you want to learn about how to use our APIs, how to work with UI extensions, I've got lots of different tutorials and different topics. So make sure to check that out. Before this, I was actually on HubSpot Academy. So if you are also an Academy fan, you probably saw me in things such as the CMS for Developers course and some other fun developer academy videos. So that's what I did. And previous to that, I was a UX designer / web developer for an agency. So I ran all of their web stuff. And yeah, I'll hand it off to Jennifer.
Awesome. Thank you, ladies. I am Jennifer Nixon, and I'm here representing the community. I am somebody who has some developer experience, and I've transitioned my career many times. I'm a community champion and just the inaugural mentors in the mentorship program last year. And yeah, doing some consulting, and I've been in everything B2C, B2B, consulting agency, and just excited to be here.
All right, thank you so much, everyone. I will hand it back to the incredible Brooke for our changelog recap.
Awesome. Yeah. So it's the end of the month, which means we've got more great changelog stuff coming. So let's go over a couple of them. So this is just a reminder that you saw last month, but the automatic deactivation of exposed tokens is happening in like a week, April 7th. So just make sure that you know about this and you are ready for that change happening. This is for security. So this is going to be a great upgrade to our security that we're offering, but don't get surprised by this. Go ahead and rotate your tokens out. Make sure everything is all good to go before this update in April. Next up, the Clearbit logo API is being deprecated, and the end of service is happening at the end of this year in December 1st. So make sure to check out the really great changelog that we have. It gives you an alternative for using this service. So if you're using this, or if you know of any like services that you have been using that use this, let them know about this so that they can make that update. Next up, we have an update to our calling extensions. Inbound calling is now available, so you can now use inbound calling inside of that calling extensions STK, and this allows developers to integrate third-party calling applications, so AirCall, RingCentral, those kinds of stuff, with HubSpot, enabling users to receive inbound calls from any page within the CRM. So make sure to check out this link to learn more about inbound calling and how you can use it with the extensions SDK. Next up, we have expanded language label support for custom actions API. So we have 7 new languages that are now supported for use. This includes Polish, Swedish, Italian, Danish, Finnish, Norwegian, and traditional Taiwanese. Traditional Chinese, not Taiwanese, sorry. So check that out. If you have any of your customers that work in those languages, you can now support those languages in your custom actions. And to go along with that language stuff, we now have a removal of the language restrictions on marketplace listings. So now when you list your app on the marketplace, you can create your listing pages in any language, regardless of your app's supported languages. So that's super helpful for all of our international app developers out there. And that's all I've got.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brooke. We love the consistency and updates and every dehug. You give us all the latest scoop. So, okay, it's time for to jump into the panel and get into some of these fun questions. So let's jump right in. I'm going to start by asking each panelist sort of, in a nutshell, how they got started in their careers, what led them to HubSpot, and anything else they'd like to share about their journey. I will just start us off. So as I mentioned, I have been working in DevRel for a long time, since 2011. My DevRel journey started when I was hired at a tiny little Montreal-based API company where I did a crash course in all things DevRel and dev community, basically everything but the actual engineering of the product. I built out our community. I took on responsibilities like, I was doing product management, product marketing, DevRel, and, emptying the garbage, because that's what happens at a startup. It was a crash course, and looking back, it was really like a pivotal moment for me. And then from there, I moved on to a bunch of different companies of different sizes, focusing on DevRel and eventually more specifically dev community. And in 2019, I brought that experience to HubSpot, where I was very lucky to join to lead some of our DevRel programs. And then I left for a year. There are reasons for that you can DM me about, and they had absolutely nothing to do with HubSpot. And then I came back in 2022 to squarely focus on community and how it impacts our DevRel efforts. And I think that the thing that I love the most is that my career, maybe I'm a little biased, but my career has been directly impacted by the communities I've been a part of that have gotten me to where I am today. And so unsurprisingly, I feel strongly that community building is a great way to build your career, especially if you're a part of an underrepresented group in tech. So with that, I would love to hand it over to Jennifer next to share her journey.
Awesome. Thank you, SJ. So my journey is a little bit unique. I followed maybe a non-traditional path. But one of the things that has kind of woven throughout my journey is web development. I first coded a website in junior high. I was the first in architecture school to have a website portfolio. Like, web has led me to landing a lot of different roles, but it's never been my full-time job. I've never been a web developer. So I first found HubSpot through inbound marketing. I didn't know it at the time. I was trying to research a new website solution to get away from like a home builder centric option. We needed a new sales CRM. And every time I was going to Google, I was finding different HubSpot things. In onboarding, I just wanted to know everything I could. And the first session was set for like a week later. I started the certifications right away. And I think there were like 10 at the time. I just kept going. And once I had them all and new ones came out, I just kept going. So I've kind of just been addicted to the learning that's incorporated with HubSpot and how we can all grow better through the platform, but through the CRM, through the tools. And it led me to, I ended up getting like partner certifications, and that led me to getting my first role with an agency. So just a lot of key moments that HubSpot has had in my journey.
Bree, would love to hear your story.
Absolutely. I think my story starts from when I was a little bit younger. I've always been interested in technology. My dad he was really good at swapping out like computer pieces on our home desktop. And I would always just kind of like sit on his lap while he did that and just look at the different computer pieces. And eventually I started playing computer games. And I think that's really where I started to get very interested in gaming and with technology. I really love to play The Sims 2, and I realized you could install your own mods for the game. And I was like, I want to make my own mods, and I want to make The Sims like however I want to, like have it. So that prompted me to take my first coding class in high school, and my first coding class was Java. And it was so great because it allowed me to be creative in a way that my friends weren't, in a way that my friends weren't. Like, they could paint and draw and do all this kind of fun stuff, and I am not talented in that way. But once I started learning things like how to make a choose your own adventure story in Java with just like really simple if else statements and then switch statements, I was like, oh my goodness, you can't tell me anything. This is exactly what I'm going to do. So I went to college for software engineering. And that's where my story kind of takes a little bit of an interesting turn. It did take me, I think, 3 years to find a job after college, because something that I didn't realize before going in is that college kind of teaches you those foundational skills, but not practical skills that you might need to land an actual job outside of school. So I spent a lot of time learning, and that's when I came across front-end development versus doing more back-end development, which is what I had experience with. And it was like falling in love with coding all over again. So I have been a front-end engineer ever since.
Love it. I always love hearing your little stories, Bree. They're always like, you always have such great aesthetics and choices. Brooke, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, so I started, and I actually talked about this in my Developers After Dark podcast episode. So if you want to listen to that to hear the whole story, you can check that out. But I started, I had a Tumblr blog back in high school, and I got really into like customizing my theme for my Tumblr blog, adding in fun little like CSS flourishes to make it really cool. And I got really invested in like making this blog like look however I wanted to. And like Bree said, it kind of lit up my world. I was like, I also can't draw very well. So I'm like, this is my drawing. And so I've always been into front-end development. So I went to college for journalism, realized I didn't like to be a reporter and ask people questions on the street. So I pivoted, and my journalism program actually had a track called Interactive Multimedia. And from there, I was able to take a bunch of front-end development classes. And after I graduated, I started working at I worked at an agency. We were a creative agency, but I worked on our internal website and blog, and did UX and web design for it. And then we were HubSpot customers. We became HubSpot customers while I was working there. So I learned how to use the product, and I really liked the product. And then during the pandemic, I wanted a change up in like what I was doing. I wanted to go to a bigger company. I wanted to like have that more like more mentors, more people that I could work with, because we were a very small company, about 30 people. And so I got reached out to on LinkedIn actually by a recruiter at HubSpot who recruited me for my job as an academy developer professor. So I kind of just fell into this role. I didn't even know that like developer education was like a thing that you could do, but I was like this kind of like, because I do like writing. That was the part of journalism that I did like. I liked writing. I liked educating. And so it was so cool that this role was able to be a hybrid of like my coding skills and my writing and education skills. And I've brought that over to the DevRel team, and I've been loving it here. I've been on the team now for a little less than a year.
Wow. Goodness gracious, time flies. I also just want to point out, like, I love how we all have these like generational markers of our like developer moments of experiences. Like it's MySpace or Tumblr or GeoCities. So Hannah, what's your story and what's your generational marker?
I guess I have experienced both with Tumblr and MySpace, and also LiveJournal. I don't know if anyone remembers that.
Diary Land, anybody? Yeah.
Yep. And it's also interesting. I feel like a lot of us have similar, like, even though we have non-traditional backgrounds, they're also semi-similar. So similar to Brooke, I went to school originally for journalism and realized, this isn't really for me. But eventually I had a job as a project manager for like a small agency. And I guess that's when I really started to get into coding. And I was like working with customers and wanting to make changes. And I really wanted to be someone who wanted to be able to implement the change instead of like report that change or manage that change. And so I went to a boot camp, and I think this was like back in the days. This was like 2016, and this was back in the days when like boot camps were like physical, like you went to a physical place, and we did that for about 4 months. And it was just nonstop coding. And that's where I learned C#. So I wasn't a Java friend. Java's tough. So shout out to all of you. But yeah, from there, what was that?
I said we broke up. It was so tough.
Yeah, exactly. So from there, I kind of was working as, my first job after that, I worked as like a full stack dev. And then I moved on to just doing back-end development. And I'd worked for an insurance company where we had like these large, like legacy monolithic systems, and we needed to start breaking them down to microservices. And so I was brought onto like a specific API team where we had to like teach our development teams how to build and design APIs. And so that was kind of where I got my first intro into advocacy, or just like combining my passion for writing and programming and helping to teach people like how to do this. And I really enjoyed that. And from there, I guess that's when I kind of discovered like advocacy. I was like, I think back then we called it evangelism, and I was an API evangelist. And from there, I got into the cloud community, and I was an advocate for a CI/CD platform. Absolutely loved it. And then I transitioned to HubSpot, and I've been here in June, it'll be 3 years. So, and I just, it's nice to like be back working with, API development and helping developers. And it's just a lot of fun, and I enjoy it. So, yeah.
I mean, that was awesome, Hannah, but I hate to do this to you, but everyone ask Hannah about her Devil Wears Prada experience one of these days.
Yes.
Well, for you, but do it.
Yeah. When I was when I was studying journalism, we had to have an internship, and I remember interviewing for magazines, and I ended up working for fashion magazines, Women's Wear Daily, and W, which are under Condé Nast. And then I moved on to a smaller magazine, Nylon, and it is exactly what you think it is. I mean, it is tough. It is, I just remember photographers being like, get out while you can. And I was like, oh, okay. And I was just like, maybe this just isn't for me, as I'm like babysitting an editor's children and like, like also doing mood boards and collecting, running.
Fun.
Yeah. I mean, there's fun aspects, but overall, I was like,
Yeah, well, I'm glad that you landed where you landed, and we're so glad you're here. I just want to say thank you for the Joni love in the chat. She's very happy to be here. All right, so I'm going to pivot now. We've learned a little bit about how you all got to where you are today. Let's talk about the things that you're excited and passionate about, the things that you're working on at HubSpot or with the HubSpot community or whatever you'd like to share. So let's kick it off with Bree.
Absolutely. So one thing about me, like I said, is I like video games, and I have a little demo to share because I have to sprinkle gaming into wherever I can. And a little bit of a backstory. The reason is when I was learning how to code, when I was like self-teaching, not when I was in school, there were a lot of times where I just like straight up felt stupid because I wasn't grasping concepts as quickly as other people said they were online. Like recursion took me a long time to understand. And one of the things that I had to learn about myself was how I learn best. And I personally learn best when I remove technological concepts from the computers, from the technology itself. So for instance, recursion, once I put that into the realm of video games and thinking about it like a dungeon crawler and having a recursive function that takes you through until you achieve a certain thing, that made it all make sense to me. So something that I like to do is help people to meet them where they are, especially with things like HubSpot, where there are so many people who wouldn't consider themselves developers, and I want people to be able to understand like the concepts of what we're trying to do outside of the technology, which will then help them become better developers, even if they don't necessarily consider themselves one. So this is an example of something that I created, which is a private UI extensions card, which is mostly what I work on these days. I do a lot with UIE, and I find that it is so fun. And it's basically a recreation of the game Wordle. So basically we have a private app card here, and it looks a little bit similar. There are a couple of differences just because we have different components that we can use in UI extensions, but it would play exactly how you would guess. So if I enter a word like hello, we can see that two of the letters that I have are correct based on the fact that they're highlighted in green, and then the rest are not in the word, so they're not highlighted at all. And maybe I will change my guess again and get a different letter. So we can see that D is in the word, but it is in the incorrect place. But when I get the word guessed correctly, we get an alert. I can see that I've won the game, and we can see this little grid that we have here. So this was something that was really fun just to do. I feel like this is a really great beginner project because it teaches you how to do things like use the context in order to pull from the account that you're on. It has really good use case of how to use the different components. And I'm actually also using a serverless function to call a random word API as well to get that going, so you get a different word every single time you play. Yeah.
That was awesome. I will hand it over to Hannah.
all right. I guess it wouldn't be a webinar with me if I didn't talk about Postman. So at HubSpot, I manage our public workspace, which houses all of our API like collections, specs for end users to use. And you know, when I was an engineer, like I used Postman religiously every day to build and test our APIs that we were working on. So it's really interesting now to be in DevRel and like just focusing on Postman in such a different way. And that different way is like we are using this developer first tool to essentially just onboard our end users with our APIs. And so I think when I first started, this was a project that I got the green light to move forward with, and I haven't looked back. And I'm just excited because now that we've established this public workspace for all of you to leverage, now I'm like, okay, what's next? Like, how can we build upon this? How can we make this more interactive? How can we make onboarding with our APIs easier? And Postman Flows is a new feature they have where essentially it's like you're using these drag and drop building blocks to leverage our public APIs and to build some sort of workflow. And so with this demo, essentially what it's doing, it's a flow that's going to demonstrate how to create an invoice for a deal that has a draft status. Then we're going to associate it with a relevant contact, company, and line items. We're going to create new line items based on those existing ones. And then we're going to associate those with the invoice, update the invoice status to open, generate a new invoice, and an invoice ID. I don't expect you all to remember that. I also, if we're going to share a repo where you can actually reference this exact flow, you can test it out yourself, and I'd love to hear your feedback on it. So I did a recording just so we could avoid any sort of issues. But essentially, this is what a flow looks like. And I'm able to just use the drag and drops to build them. And each flow has an associated collection. It also has an associated environment. And when you are kicking off each flow, you're going to use, for this one specifically, we're going to use like a deal ID. And so I'm providing an existing deal ID to kick off the flow. And then it kind of just like walks you through. You can customize this. I can add TypeScript if I want to do something with the response data and pass that on to the next request. And hopefully no one's getting nauseous. But then what I'm going to do is I'm going to kick off the flow, and you can kind of see it running. And then it's going to provide me that new invoice ID. I'm going to go to my HubSpot account. I'm going to pull that invoice. So essentially, I'm just hoping to do more of these flows. If anyone has any use cases where you're like, man, I would really like to see that, please let me know. I would love to build that, because these are going to be meant for you to iterate on and customize for your own use cases. So thanks.
That's awesome. Thank you, Hannah. You are indeed the post woman, as so aptly mentioned in chat. Jennifer, we'd love to hear what you're working on these days.
Yeah, right now I'm working on how I can help support other champions to like level up and rank, and people who want to become champions or get involved in the community. So I'm working on a mini series on LinkedIn about the journey to a champion. So kind of going back to the beginning, how I got started, and tips and tricks, and all the fun highlights. I have a poll running right now. So if you want to vote on where you'd like to see information, getting started, getting points, whatever it is, leveling up, you can vote, and then I'll be sharing those posts coming up.
Love that. For those of you who aren't familiar, the HubSpot Champions program is a great opportunity for you to be incentivized and get all kinds of great things and rewards for helping the community out and sharing, all these cool HubSpot updates. So Jennifer is definitely the right person to talk to about that program. And we're always looking for more, technically minded folks to join that program. Brooke, what have you got for us?
Yeah, so this is actually not HubSpot related, but I'm currently an adjunct instructor, and I am teaching a college course, and my students are tasked with building a website end to end for the semester. And so I'm teaching them how to use a static site generator. We're using Eleventy, which is really fun to actually work with. And we're also using Tailwind, because that's such a fun way to like make CSS more accessible when you're doing templating and stuff like that. And finally, I'm teaching them how to plug it into a CMS. So we're working through different things. Currently, we're using Decap CMS to connect it to Netlify, and showing them how to grab that data from a CMS backend to put it to the front end. And at the end of the semester, we're going to be having a showcase of all of the work, and it's going to be live streamed on April 23rd. So I don't have the link to that live stream yet, but when I do, make sure to check out my LinkedIn, and you all can join that and see all the great work that my students are doing.
That's so cool. I love that. Like, we all sort of have this shared desire to facilitate education. And so I love that you're like literally, dropping the knowledge in a classroom setting, Brooke. That's so cool. I am not going to share any demos because I'm doing enough yapping in this conversation. But I'm going to jump into, something that's maybe a little more challenging and nuanced, but I think really important to bring up. And what I hope that, the underrepresented folks listening today can relate to. And for folks who don't necessarily identify as being underrepresented in tech, hopefully you can kind of listen in and learn how you can support those who face higher barriers to entering tech and, ultimately working in the HubSpot community. So I'd love to ask everyone on the panel if they'd like, this is optional as well, because this is a little more nuanced, to share any stories or experiences where they may have felt that identity, underrepresented identity, impacting their careers and their options, or the moments where they face those challenges. So I will start just to set the tone, and so you'll know kind of like what to expect. So, I mean, unfortunately, I have a million stories that I could share in this vein, but I think I'm going to start with something just kind of high level, and that has a happy ending too. So about 12 years ago, when I first started in DevRel, I was doing so many hackathons. Like, as I mentioned, it was a 3-person startup, and I was the one traveling and going to hackathons all the time, which is wild because I know Nick thinks I'm a webmaster, but I may not actually be a full-on developer like a lot of folks in this room. And that being said, I did what I could to demo our API, help developers with their apps. And more than once, I did find myself as the only woman at these events. And sometimes they were overnight hackathons. And honestly, that could be just an intimidating experience. Like, as women, we are often taught from an early age that we should be extra cautious in all male environments. And sometimes it did feel like my voice could get lost or dismissed. But luckily, I had some allies who recognized the situation and went out of the way to make me feel more comfortable and included and safe. And those people, I don't think they're listening today. They might be. They're from a long time ago, but they should know who they are. And I'm so grateful that I had those folks to help me feel included and safe in those situations. So if you ever find yourself in a similar situation, look for the folks who are there to support you. And those folks who, you want to see your, colleagues or community friends succeed, then raise your hand and offer them that support. And don't hesitate, if you're going through that, to really lean on their care and empathy. So that's my little story. I will hand it over to Bree if she'd like to share a story. And remember, panelists, this one is optional.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that I've struggled with the most is being in spaces and people assuming that I'm not a technical person, or trying to over-explain topics to me that I know thoroughly. This happened at a conference where I built a demo for something, and I was so happy because I was like, oh my goodness, I get to actually like showcase and people get to see something that I built. So I took a lot of pride in what I had built and what I was creating, and I was ready to explain it and talk to people. But I very quickly realized that people didn't want to ask me the technical questions. They wanted to know who built it, but I was the person who built it. And then after saying that I was the person who built it, they still wanted to talk to somebody else who was technical. And that is a really hard barrier to get over when you are trying to be polite and not just be like, I'm the one, you're asking questions, you're going to ask them, but they're going to ask me because I did the building, I made the thing. And for me personally, I have come to grips that like this is what is going to happen. It is just unfortunately a part of some people's mentality that they can't always get over the hump of, maybe I don't look like what their version of an engineer or somebody who's technical is. But what I do is I just continue to answer their questions to the best of my ability. And I no longer try to change their outlook or their aspect, because it's not my responsibility to try to do so. So in this case, for this conference, I was able to answer questions, or if they had other questions and wanted to ask other folks who were around, they had the option to do that as well. Those folks did also have to ask me, but hey, it all worked out.
Yep, that's it. That's usually how we end up, being like, look, I'm the one answering the question, bud. Anyway, Hannah, what would you like to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Bree and I were actually talking a while back, and I was thinking, I was like, wow, like, I was probably the only female on my team, or identified as female, for years and years. And it wasn't until I had worked with my first female engineer. Her name was Juna. And she's awesome. She's like at Progressive Insurance right now. She's an engineer. But really, it wasn't until like then. And then when I pursued advocacy, I got to work with this amazing woman, Tracy Holmes. Shout out to Tracy. She like it. I don't know. It was really difficult because I didn't have a voice, or at least I didn't feel heard, and I didn't feel just, I don't know, like I could take up space. And that was also like, it was because of the environment, but it was also because of me. And, I definitely was feeling kind of just like not good enough or just like insecure. And nowadays, it's like my biggest advice for people is to just speak up, ask questions. Don't be afraid if you think the question is dumb, because I guarantee there's someone else who has that question. And it's like I really learned from those women that like, hey, like you're like worthy to take up space, to ask questions, to have an opinion in these meetings on this project, whatever you're working on, because it does matter. And maybe you don't have maybe 20 years of experience, but also if you're new, you have a different perspective that is really valuable that also needs to be considered. So I think like honestly, that's just been the biggest lesson I've had, is to like just speak up. Don't be afraid. Because honestly, like those who support you when you do speak up, that's the people you want around you. So
Totally.
yeah.
One of my favorite Hannah moments is when shortly after she joined the dev advocacy team, she put together some high level sort of feedback on our onboarding and the developer experience. And it was so great to get that perspective from someone new. And it was really valuable for the teams that she, provided that feedback on. So thank you for doing that, Hannah. Brooke, love to hear from you if you'd like to share.
Yeah, sure. So I've been reflecting on this question, and this was actually like an internal thing to me. Like I had this barrier when I first started at HubSpot, because on the HubSpot Academy team at that time, it was just mainly male faces on the Academy app, especially in the developer space. It was Jeff Ashura. He's a really great educator, developer, great guy, but it was just him. And so it was a little bit intimidating to me, like coming in, being younger, a female, a woman of color. Like there was a lot of things that I was worried that the community would like look at me and they would see like a video with my face on it and be like, how can I trust this person to teach me something technical? And so that was like an internal hurdle that I had to like come to terms with. And I had great connections with my manager at the time about that, and with Jeff, and we talked through that, and I voiced my concerns to them, and they really heard me and listened to me, and they said, well, like, Brooke, you know the stuff, like we've read your scripts, we know that what you're saying is factual and accurate and it's great work, and like if the people like who are watching the videos, like if they don't see that value because of how you identify, that's not on you, that's on them. And so for me, that was like really like not satisfying, but it really encouraged me when I was like feeling really scared to like put out my first content, because I was so nervous that people would perceive me in a way and not find me to be like technical enough for them. And that was a fear that was quickly assuaged by all of the great comments that I got on my content about people feeling like my stuff was really valuable. So thank you to everybody who has watched all of my content, because like you're the reason why I'm here on this team working and doing this every day, and not feeling afraid to like continue to put out tutorials and stuff like that, because I get such great feedback from the community.
And not to mention, people still be reaching out to Brooke on the Academy channel in the dev Slack. And we're like, she's moved on, but she still, answers those questions when she can. So don't keep doing that, but do keep communicating with each other. We love that. Jennifer, I'd love it if you have anything to share, we'd love to hear it.
Yeah, so I went into college not knowing what my major was going to be. I had a lot of friends that did like business computer information systems in high school, and I didn't. But I took CSE 1301, so Introductory to Computer Science Engineering. And I was the only female in the entire class, almost the building. Like there was nobody else in there. And we had a lot of international students, so I just really stood out in the class. And in week 2, my professor pulled me aside and said, I'm not really sure this is where you belong. Not only like, would you be better suited for something that's not behind the computer screen, but you're kind of a distraction here. And it was really embarrassing, but it was worse because it was a female professor. And so I really took it hard that maybe like this isn't where I belong. But I finished that class. I didn't want to drop because my dad, I mean, my dad didn't let me drop a class. But I finished it, and I ended up going into architecture because I didn't feel supported there. And I was very, very fortunate to have a mentor who helped me. He was a male, but he helped me to understand how to overcome the challenges in a male dominated profession. And he helped set me up for success. And he was like, these are the things that you need to do. This is what you need to look out for. This is, be careful how you make things look. Focus on these aspects instead of, make sure you're not adding filler words because it's going to come across a lot worse from you than from the guys, So just somebody who was very aware of how challenging it was going to be for me was really helpful. And then the other piece of it for me was just, I learned HTML and CSS so long ago. So when I got back into it, I had a little bit of imposter syndrome. I worked with some phenomenal developers. The community is filled with people of all different skill levels, but I had never really validated what I knew. I took an HTML, CSS, JavaScript class on Coursera, and then I started, working on it. But I actually saw Brooke's video on LinkedIn about installing the CLI, which was just so overwhelming to me because I've been a design manager girly for like so long, just making my edits directly, and just seeing that a friendly face telling me like, you can do this, you can install it. I jumped in and I finally got CMS for developers certification. And yeah, it kind of validated that it's okay to be different and to belong at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, I love that story so much. It's like literally the air I breathe is stories like that. So thank you so much. I'm so glad. Just the importance of representation in all of the work that we do. It's so key to be able to see ourselves in the materials that we're using to learn and grow our careers. All right, so this is going to be the last panel question, and we are running a little ahead. So let's maybe go through these a little quickly. So we're going to talk about, I think we've already alluded to it a little bit, but community and mentorship. And of course, I'm selfishly wanting to toot my own horn for the ecosystem mentorship program. Yes, we have finished pairing for this cohort, but please put your names on the interest list for the next one. All of those resources will be available in the GitHub repo that Dennis is going to share. But I would love to hear from all of you of how you think community and mentorship can help kind of elevate and support underrepresented folks as they begin their journeys, both on HubSpot and in general. And Jennifer, that story you just told was so great. And, you're probably the first person I turned to for this particular story. So I would love to hear any sort of wise wisdom that you have about this specific question.
Yeah, so obviously I've pivoted careers. I went from architecture to construction, marketing. I went through graphic design, web. I've been at agency. And I think that one of the things that is really helpful with the community is that there are people of all skill levels. So you can't ask a dumb question. You can ask questions freely, and you really have to decide to invest in yourself. And you have to know where am I today? What is my current situation? What is my learning? What are my capabilities? And where do I want to go? And then if you start asking the right questions, just like if you jump in Slack or any of the channels we have and you're just like, hey, how do I do this practicum for the CMS certification? Nobody's going to be able to help you because we don't know what your experience is. We don't know what, do you need to take a preliminary course first? Are you having trouble installing something? You have to know where you are so that you can ask the questions that will get you the answers you need. I'm having trouble installing the CLI. Can you help me? I'm getting a really weird NPM error on Mac. Can somebody just get on the screen share with me? Those are the things that have really been helpful, and the things that I try to help my mentees and the people that I've worked with through the community is just understanding that the type of question you ask will lead to better help. And it's why, when I post in the community, the first thing I usually respond is questions. What's your use case? What's your industry? What are you doing? Because I have to understand more context around it to give you that help that you really need.
Yeah. Actually, I feel like just for fun, I'm going to say that like that also applies to your AI prompts. The more, the more specific you are, the better responses you're going to get from AI. Brooke, do you have any advice for this amazing audience?
Yeah, I just think that the biggest thing that I have taken away from being an adjunct instructor and helping like students who are like just, they're graduating, they're getting ready to go into the workforce is I think a big part of getting into this job force today is having those connections with people who can help you get your foot in the door. And so that's something that like I students are hesitant about, and I think people in general are hesitant about like being the one to like reach out on LinkedIn and say, hey, hi, my name is Brooke and I'm looking to do this. And like I have gotten so many of those messages, and I feel like people are scared to like make those messages because they think that someone's going to perceive them in a way as being like too needy or stuff like that. But I think genuinely most people in this world are like wanting to help other people, which is why community is so important. And so I guess what I recommend is like to just risk, like put yourself out there, be okay to say, hey, you don't know me, but I follow you. I like your stuff. I really want to learn more about what you do. Would you be okay talking to me? And most of the time people will say, hey, yeah, that really works for me. I've got this time available. Or they'll say, hey, that's great, but I'm not available until X date. And they work with you. Like it's usually not a solid no where they're just going to shut you down. So like that's what I recommend to people, just to like be a little bit bolder and, make those like I think about it like this quote of like, all you need is 20 seconds of courage. And so I think that everyone, if you apply that to your life, you just need 20 seconds of courage to go ahead and send that LinkedIn message, send a DM on the Slack channel, wherever you're talking to people.
I love that. And don't get discouraged if you don't get an answer. Keep summoning those 20 seconds. Hannah, what would you like to share?
Yeah, I think when it comes to HubSpot specifically, keeping your eyes peeled for programs that we're doing, I think that's the best way to just get your foot in the door. But from like a broader perspective, I found community when I started engaging on social platforms. So when I was primarily an engineer, I felt very isolated. It felt impossible to connect and learn from people outside my existing team. And it wasn't honestly until I started getting, more involved on Twitter, like tech Twitter, and like connecting with people on there, learning about different open source projects, learning ways to contribute to those open source projects. Like if you're scared to contribute code, start with the documentation. And then from those, it's like you then join that Slack channel, you're connecting with people there and like asking questions and learning about a project or some sort of tech stack. Like I can't encourage folks enough to like just to pursue that. And I was very lucky that with getting involved with like the CNCF, which was like the Cloud Nation Computing Foundation. I think that's what they stand for. But the CNCF is very popular, and like that's where I made so many friends and got to learn about so many different tools. And so really, to Brooke again, like to just put yourself out there and try something new, and then just seeing where that takes you.
Love it. Bree.
I think I'm just going to echo what everybody else has already said. I think whenever you're starting anything new, you should find your community within that early and often. Even if you feel like you have a unique identity, I guarantee you there is a community out there for you. And if there's not, start your own, because there are other people who identify with you who are also looking for a space of belonging and a space of community and a safe space to say that they're afraid, or that they're like really struggling with things, or that their journey isn't going how they wanted it to, or maybe it's taking like a little bit longer. So I guess my add-on would be, if you don't see a community that you feel like you fit in, don't hesitate to add your own, because somebody out there also will likely benefit from the community that you're building.
Lovely. That is the most perfect segue into what I was going to say. So I don't know how you knew that, Bree, but it worked out perfectly. I had a very long story here, but just in the spirit of time, I think the only thing I'd like to stress to the folks listening is that indeed, if you can't find yourself in a community, create your own. But before you do that, try and see if in fact, you are a member of that community and you don't necessarily realize it. I think the one thing I've learned over and over in the HubSpot developer community with folks like Jennifer and folks like Anton and folks like, a lot of the folks that have been featured in all of this great YouTube content is like, we don't always identify developers as developers. In order to succeed on HubSpot, you really need to understand HubSpot customer problems. And a lot of times that means starting as a marketer or as an admin or in different sort of paths towards HubSpot actual development. And I also feel strongly with the, dawn of AI and the way that there are so many different motivations that I see coming through our developer community that the word developer itself is broadening the definition of what a developer is. And, even on DevRel, we define a developer as folks solving really complex customer problems. And usually that's through code. It's not always through code, especially with AI and low code, no code. So I would just say, don't count yourself out before you try to make those connections in the community, especially in the HubSpot developer community. It's a really broad, really welcoming space, and we want you to join us. So, all right, I'm going to move over to some of the audience questions that we have come in. Ooh, we have 6 minutes left, so I'm going to go through 2 of those, and then I'll do a very short wrap up. Let's see what we got here. An important question from a Mr. Steve Laham, who may or may not be our collective, not all of us, but our collective boss. An important question for Bree about her favorite video game of all time.
I have 2. So my real favorite video game of all time is going to be Zelda Twilight Princess. Was the first game that I completed 100%. My favorite Zelda game ever, even though I really love Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Love them, but Twilight Princess will always hold my heart. But my second one, which is tied, and it's the game that I've played the most recently, and I keep coming back to it, is Red Dead Redemption 2. And I just can't get away from it. I just keep going back to it.
Love it. Thanks. I hope that was satisfying for Steve. I hope we know what your next game is going to be. From Pujari, how can I build my career in HubSpot development, especially in India? I created my first HubSpot app a week ago. Well, first of all, congratulations on creating your first HubSpot app. That's awesome. And I think that some of the advice that we shared today, hopefully I'll let the others chime in, but I know that there are some, there's more HubSpot momentum in India with the opening of our Indian office that happened last year. And what I don't know is how much they're, reaching out to the community, but I do know that the presence is there. And I also know that we have a lot of folks in our mentorship program that are in the Indian community. I know India is a huge country, but I would say that put the word out on your social spaces. I know on LinkedIn, there's a lot of folks in the Indian community that are building on HubSpot. And perhaps, I think there may even be, correct me if I'm wrong, someone who knows the Hug program better than I do, there may even be an Indian Hug. So Hug is a HubSpot user group. So I would say look into those. And feel free to reach out to any of us if you have more sort of specific areas that you'd like some support in. We're going to share our community profiles or access to contact us in the GitHub repo. And then one more question from HubSpot developers. Interesting. I have a question. When you have a toxic experience, how do you pull yourself out of it? How do you not allow it to take over your day at work and after? Well, HubSpot developers, that's not always the easiest thing. So I might defer to others on this one. If anyone else has any hot tips about this one?
I like to go for a walk. Just clear my mind, go outside, and eat chocolate.
Yeah, I think similar to definitely step away, collect yourself, come with a clear head, sleep on it even. Yeah. But I think when you do have a toxic experience at work and you just can't shake it off, really maybe try if it's coming from a person, talking to that person, and come with it as far as expressing that the situation is hurting you. and just express that and try, your best to just be polite and respectful to each other. But I think, ultimately going to that person and talking about that and seeing if there's a path forward, or at least expressing you'd like a path forward, because you want to work together, you want to work well together. And if that isn't responsive, then you've done all you can. And just, I think continue to focus on what you need to do and what you're working on and get excited with that. So
yeah, like I think honing in on the areas where you do feel like you have impact.
exactly.
Letting that do the talking for you is sometimes a great way to approach this. We have another question from Mr. John McLaren. What do you think is the best way for those that don't identify as female to support those who do in the workplace, at events, and online? So one thing, there's a couple things that I would say to this, and then I'll pass it to the group. There's mentorship, which we all know well because I've talked about that enough. And there's also this concept of sponsorship. And I think the difference between the two, mentorship is obviously pairing people to help, learn, and often they're learning from each other. But a mentor tends to have more experience and can guide someone through some of the more challenging aspects of, what they're embarking upon. Whereas a sponsor is someone who's like going out of their way to provide actual distinct opportunities to someone. So for example, say you have been given a speaking slot at a conference and you feel like, hey, I know this, female developer who's just as qualified as me, and I've already done 3 talks this year. Maybe I can suggest this person instead. So that's like a very specific opportunity that you can plug that person into. So I'd look and just like do a little more research on mentorship versus sponsorship. And you can also mentor. Mentoring is great. Anyone else?
I think listening and being an active listener in spaces and in communities is a really big thing. Something that I think we've all mentioned at some point is not feeling like you have space to have a voice or have space to listen, or even in my situation where it's obvious that I was telling somebody how I felt. I was trying to be assistive to somebody and they weren't catching on to the fact that their question was really harmful and assuming that I wasn't a technical person. So sort of like having your eyes and ears open when it's possible in communities when you know that there are other people around that may not have the same level of privilege as you, I think is really important.
It's 3:00.
It's 3:00. Okay.
Sorry.
That's actually really helpful. To wrap it up then, thank you everyone so much for joining us. And I want to give a huge shout out to my fellow panelists who did such an awesome job today. It's such a pleasure working with all of you. And again, a huge round of applause to Dennis, Anton, and Toon for giving us this space to share with the community. We really appreciate it. I think there's going to be more coming from this group in the YouTube space that you can expect. I won't say anything specific yet, but stay tuned. Make sure you subscribe to the Developer Hugs, and subscribe to our newsletter. And if Dennis can share that GitHub repo that's going to have all those resources, that would be delightful. And thank you again, everybody. Really appreciate you all. Have a wonderful day. And thank you to the amazing folks in the chat too.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.